Welcome back, Flyers fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, and my special guest for the evening, somebody I've been listening to for quite a bit on Hockey Buzz, but also is part of Detroit Hockey Now as well, formerly of USA Today, but you said it was 35 years.
Yep.
Kevin Allen, thank you so much for joining. Kevin, how are you?
I'm great. Happy to join you, and I'm always up for hockey talk, so happy to get going.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who are not aware, if you haven't watched them on Hockey Buzz, you definitely should. You should definitely check out Eklund's podcast with the rest of the crew. I've had Mike on here, and I've had Russ on here a few times already. So definitely make sure you guys check it out.
Two of my favorite people. So
yeah,
I like getting Mike about how grumpy he is, and I call Russ Dr. Death because no one will put up someone dying quicker than Russ will on social media. So.
Yeah, I've been noticing that a little bit. Yeah. The guy's empathetic, so I can understand.
That's what he always says. He says, "Well, I just like these people, and I want to pay tribute." So but I'm not the only one who noticed it too. I saw Ed Berliner, who was was it Ed? Maybe it wasn't Ed. Anyway, I saw a broadcaster take note that, boy, that Russ Cohen, like he gets gets those death notices up quicker than anybody I've ever seen. So.
Yeah, and there's been a big one. I mean, speaking of which, just shout out to Kevin Hayes for the loss of his brother Jimmy Hayes. So condolences to the family. We changed our logo for the year in honor of Jimmy Hayes. So that was pretty sad news.
That's incredibly sad. Anytime a 31-year-old athlete, I've talked to athletes through the years too about it, and there's kind of an air of invincibility when you're an athlete. You think that you can't be touched. So when something like this happens, everybody in the sport, and hockey is a very small community, and it's really like a family. But when things like this happen, or someone gets a serious illness, there's always a whoa. How does this happen? And I think. I just read yesterday in the Boston Globe that there's going to be an autopsy, and I think actually everyone in hockey is, kind of interested to see what will be said about the cause of his death.
Yeah, and I don't want to speculate anything at all, but it's definitely very sad news. And I remember we had a slew of these actually several years ago with a bunch of I don't like to call them fighters, but I guess enforcer types. Where we had, I think, 3 died in the same summer. And it's just like, I know Jimmy Hayes was a physical player, but you never know. You don't want to hear it's head injuries either. So, I don't really know exactly this.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of us kind of know what it is, but it's just sad. And this comes on the top of, we've lost some elder statesmen. The Rangers lost Rod Gilbert, who's, his nickname was Mr. Ranger. And, of course, the great Tony Esposito, brother of Phil Esposito.
Yep.
Passed away as well, and one of the great all-time goalies, one of the early butterfly style users, and had been around the sport for a very long time. Yeah,
it's unfortunate, but I like to think a lot of people are kind of saying, "Oh, Kevin Hayes could have a big year." It all depends on how he handles it. I've lost my father. And that set me back quite a bit of time. And I hope he handles this well. I hope he, like you said, kind of learn to appreciate what you do have and how much time you have, and don't take it for granted.
Yeah. And, if you look at his messages about how much his brother meant to him, that his brother almost mentored him.
Yep.
He said in his social media post that he loved him. And I had the sense that he was almost going to dedicate this season to his brother. I don't know if it was those words, but that was the impression I got from reading his reaction to this. He's clearly devastated by this, as we all can imagine.
Yeah, and I know the Barstool guys are big with the Hayes brothers, and Spittin' Chicklets decided not to do an episode this week, and it's definitely affecting the hockey community. So, you just hate to see it, But I guess let's try to move forward here. I do want to talk about you. I want to give people a little bit of a background. So I mentioned earlier you wrote for USA Today for 35 years. You've recently changed that. But one thing I looked you up on Wikipedia a little bit before this, and I actually didn't know this, but I found this very interesting that you are responsible for breaking the news about Mario Lemieux. and his return to hockey. Is that correct?
It is. I know Eric Tahacek has called it the last clean kill that we've ever had as a scoop, because it was pre internet, and now a scoop lasts all of 23 seconds before it's everywhere. But back then we didn't have that, and I know the story about it that was fun for me was Tom McMillan, who was a former writer who was VP of the Penguins at the time, called Mario and said it got out, and Mario, who I knew, said, "Who got it?" And he said, "Kevin Allen," and he said, "Give him an hour." And what that meant was they weren't going to confirm or deny for a full hour, which meant ESPN had to run it across their lower. According to USA Today's Kevin Allen, Mary Lemieux is coming back. So it was my biggest scoop. I had other scoops, but not one that big. And I look back at that with fond memories, because it was a bit of a detective work. I still have never explained how I got it, and I won't. But it wasn't like somebody called me and said, "Hey, Mario's coming back." We got one piece of information which made me go, and then I got another piece of information, and then finally I got people to confirm that he was coming back. And I appreciated the fact that Mario respected me enough to give me my time with that scoop.
That's awesome. That's awesome. They actually even understood that giving you an hour would be that kind of impact and letting you carry that news. What was that like? Because obviously we dealt with the story here in Philadelphia of Oscar Lindblom. He didn't even miss a season, which is crazy. But what was that like to watch one of the greatest players ever to kind of step away, and then for you to kind of discover that he was coming back?
Well, like I said, I knew him a little bit. I had done a lot of stories with him, and we had kind of a unique relationship. He had some fun with me. I'd always say, "Hey, Mario, I just need a minute," and he would then say, "Okay," and then he'd look at his watch and say, "Go." It was one of those type things.
He's like
and then
Chris Pronger.
Kind of a lot like Chris Pronger. I knew Prongs as well, and that's how he was. I actually have a pretty good Chris Pronger story too.
I'd love to hear that too.
But I had done stories about his charitable work, and one of the reasons when I asked him what he was going to do when he retired, he said, "I'm going to play golf. I'm going to play golf every day," and he loved golf. He was pretty good at it. And then when he came back, I remember asking him, "Well, why'd you come back?" He says, "There's just so much golf you can play. After a while, part of the fun of golf is, carving out time, trying to get away to play the golf. Well, when you can play all the time, it's not nearly as fun." So, I think that was to it. And I also think his son was old enough to sort of recognize and appreciate what a great player he was. And I think he wanted to be a part of that. And also, being able to come back, there was excitement centering around, the Penguins then. They had been bad for a while, and now they had a chance to be good again. He was going to come back and do all that. And, there's a great photo in his house of him. His son was born premature, and there's a picture of him holding his son in the palm of his hand. That's how small he was. And I think that probably was the greatest impact, that he wanted to, his son was older. He could appreciate seeing his dad play. And so he was going to do all that. But it was a real fun time to be me when he came back. And, he always, Mario is a very private person. And he does not, even today, like I probably know him as well as anyone, and I can't get an interview with him. He just doesn't do them. He doesn't even do them for his rights holder, the sponsors of his team. He just doesn't do interviews. So, but when he was playing, I always got a little extra minute with him and stuff. And we've had a good relationship. Even when I go to Pittsburgh, he won't give me an interview, but if he sees me, he'll walk over and say hello. So that's all I get. I don't get it. It's the same thing I say about Nashville's David Poile. I've known him for 37 years. He's one of my best quotes. I love talking to him on any league subject because he's glib. He has a all world approach to everything, a worldly approach. but the next scoop I get from him will be the first. He has never given me a scoop in 37 years. He plays everything close to the vest. There's a few guys like that that I have great relationships with, but they're just not guys that hand you information. And Lou Lamoriello is like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that one that one is like obvious.
I'm friendly with him. We both started the same year when I was honored by the Hall of Fame. I got a handwritten letter from him, but he's not going to tell me, hey, I've got trade working with the Calgary Flames. He's just never going to do that. But he's going to be helpful the best he can. But he makes reference to the fact that the first year I started covering for USA Today was the first year he was the GM of the Devils. So.
Yeah, and he made my life a nightmare growing up. To be honest with you, with that team, Martin Brodeur and whatnot. So what was if you don't mind me asking, what was the Chris Pronger story that you had?
Oh, I was just going to say about a lot of people who dealt with Chris think he's a little surly. He's confrontational sometimes. He challenges you. He likes to challenge writers.
Sure.
I know Eklund brought up the story, and I wasn't there for it, but I remember hearing the story that a young reporter had asked him questions that were sort of bordered on edgy questions. And, Chris sort of looked at him and said, you haven't logged enough games in this league to ask me those questions, And the story I have about him was, I had known Chris Pronger since his draft year. He was a very unique player because he was so big, 6'6", and he was also an offensive player, and he was still physical. So he combined a lot of attributes that you usually didn't see in one package. So I'd gone to do a story on him when he was in the Ontario Hockey League, and then that carried over into the NHL. So I had a relationship with him. And he liked talking hockey, and I liked talking to him, but he had signed a big contract in St. Louis, and it was a contract that was going to sort of change the financial landscape. People were going to use that as a basis for comparison. So I tried to track him down, and I left a message, and then I realized I had looked at the schedule, and I said, oh, shoot, he's playing today. For some reason, I thought St. Louis wasn't playing. So right around 6:30, I get this call, and he said, Kevin, Chris here. And I said, aren't you about to go on the ice? He goes, yeah. I said, why are you calling me? He said, you left me a message. And I said, well, I didn't expect you to return my call when I realized that. And he goes, hey, Kevin, you call me, I return your call. And I thought, how many guys are like that in the National Hockey League? If you had a relationship with them, if you treated them well, Pronger could be just a great guy to deal with. But I've seen him where, he could be tough, but, he was tough in a kind of a fun, lighthearted way, like I think like that was part of his persona. He liked to convey that, but I never saw him like lose his temper or anything.
Yeah. He seemed like the type of guy always led by example, from kind of what I can, obviously on the ice for sure, but even like the fact that you said that he's like quick and sharp, like he talks quick and sharp. So if you're dealing with him, right, and you're interviewing him, he expects you to kind of act the way he acts. Like, I feel like that's a big part of his personality.
No, that's very insightful. I think that's right. Glenn Sather, the great general manager for the Oilers in their heyday, he was like that. Before he would give you good answers, you needed to prove to him that you were worthy. And I think Chris was like that. That's sort of a common thing in the NHL. I remember when the outdoor game was in Washington, and was it Chicago and Washington? Yeah, I think that was it. Anyway, Brent Seabrook was there, and Brent Seabrook I knew, but I think he sort of recognized me, and he knew I belonged, but I don't know if he knew exactly who I was. But I was in a scrum with about 7 or 8 people that I didn't even recognize, and I was president of the Writers Association, so I had no idea who they were. And everybody's asking questions, and he was giving like 1- and 2-word answers. And I asked my question, and he gave me a very thoughtful answer, paused to kind of reflect on it, and you could see everybody, kind of scribbling it down, making sure of it. And I realized then that it was the same sort of thing. He didn't know any of these other guys, but he knew I belonged. So, he was going to give me the respect of, that I was part of all that. And so he was going to give me a good answer. And I think that there's a lot of that goes on in this league that, once you've sort of passed muster, that everyone sort of says, okay, you're an okay guy. I'm going to, give you what you need. And in return, you give that player respect for, being, a good guy.
That's pretty insightful. And we have some young writers that listen to this. So hopefully they're taking note to what you're saying as well.
I mean, relationships are, even everything in this new world, they're crucial.
Yeah.
And that's why, I'm starting sort of a new gig here where I'm going to be covering the Red Wings a little bit. And I've said to my bosses, I said, I'm just concerned about, COVID, keeping us out of the dressing room yet again, because, I've never been, covered one team. I've covered the whole league. So, I want to get into that Red Wings dressing room, start establishing relationships. And I can't do that over Zoom.
Absolutely. I mean, we have credentials to the Flyers as well. And I've been in that locker room quite a bit, and we haven't been back since. And it's definitely a different experience covering the team. Like, there's little details that you see that you'll never get that through, the press conference at the end, or calling them through a Zoom call. It's just not happening. So yeah, it is concerning. Hopefully that opens up more than we're thinking. But let me ask you this, actually, since we're talking about kind of the past, how do you think that the game, the one thing I make fun of on this show a lot, maybe it's, maybe a little too much, is the two things I hate is that this is a young man's game and that size isn't important, because I find that both of those statements aren't true. Size is absolutely still immensely important, as we can see from the Stanley Cup Finals. And the only reason it's a young man's game is because guys are forced to be paid less because of the salary cap. Outside of that, veteran teams are still the ones winning cups and still the ones making it far. And actually, as you can see, when the Flyers this past year, we'll talk about them, when they were pretty young on the back end, it was a disaster. So how have you seen the game evolved since, I guess we don't have to say since you started, but the earlier portion of your career to now? Do you find that it's evolved as much as people think outside of the speed, or is it, am I making an incorrect assumption?
Oh no, it's evolved greatly on and off the ice. When I started, and I tell this story, people are shocked by this, but I would say only 1 out of 6 players in the 1980s could one-time the puck. Yari Curry was special because he was so good at it. Now everybody in the league. Back in the 1980s into the 90s, every defense had a human pylon. A guy who didn't skate quite as well, who you could go wide on. I mean, Mike Bossy, made a living out of going wide against that guy and getting around him and then just ripping a shot. So the skill level now, and also everyone is so well schooled in defense. Like, they've all gone to defense school since they were 4 and 5 years old. So players are just a lot smarter. They're a lot better prepared. They know what's expected of them. The conditioning level, completely different. Rod Brindamore was actually part of that. Rod Brindamore was one of the first guys to live in a weight room. And now guys, I mean, I had a player say to me, it's been 2 or 3 years ago, that, if you want to eat a hamburger in this league, you've got to do it alone. Because if you're with a teammate, he's going to give you grief. And I interviewed Charlie Coyle a couple of years ago, and he told me in the off season, he has all of his meals, he orders them, and they deliver to him to meet his nutritional needs the entire off season. Like, in the old days, guys used to drink all summer. Yep. And, boating and skiing and golfing and eating hamburgers and fries. And then they'd come to, and this is into the 90s even, guys would come in and then get in shape and throw up in a few garbage cans while they were trying to get in shape, and then they'd play the season. And nowadays guys are in condition kind of all every month, every day of the year. And I think that's been a big difference as well. And there's also stick handling coaches, individual coaches that players hire to help them. So there's just a higher level of sophistication. And then with regard to what's happening on the ice, there was a period of about 3 years, and the Penguins fueled this, where there was a tremendous, probably greatest emphasis I've ever seen on speed. The game was already faster because the slow guys had been weeded out, and also we don't have any fighters. So guys who can't play, they don't exist anymore. So that also increased the league speed. But there was, right after the Penguins won in 2016, everybody got faster, and that brought in some younger guys because a lot of them were faster, and so the game did get younger. But now we've settled back into, just as you alluded to, everybody's heavy on the back end. You got to have that, and and people think the heaviness is important because you're pushing the other team around, and yeah, there is some of that, but it's also important because you've got to push them around, and that wears you out. So if you're heavy and you're 230 pounds and you're trying to crash the net in a 7-game series, that's that plays a role. So with regard to the smaller players, a smaller player couldn't play in the 80s and 90s because the game was so hostile that they would just they would shrink and die. Now you can do that. The referees do not allow some of the things that prevented smaller players to play. I mean, only a guy like Theo Fleury could play back in those days. Today, Cole Caulfield can exist. He would have had a difficult time in the 80s. For sure. Just because of all the stick work and holding and physical strength was so important in the 80s and 90s because you had to get through to make a check. I mean, we saw it in the mid 80s. Guys could do it. Guys like Eiserman and Howard Chuck, Turgeon, they came right out of junior. They played, and then all of a sudden it just changed overnight. We got much bigger, stronger guys, and suddenly those 18-year-old kids couldn't get through to get to the net. Well, now you can. Even against bigger guys, they won't let you physically dominate them. Plus, those 18-year-olds are stronger themselves. They've worked out. So there's room now for the smaller guy. They're worth DeBrincat in Chicago. I mean, no way could have played in the 1980s. Yeah. So absolutely. So I agree with you that size does matter. It is important. Physical strength matters. Experience matters greatly. That's why every trade deadline, guys are trying to get guys that won the cup before because they know how to climb the mountain. They've already been. Most of them have been to the summit, and they can try to explain how to do it again.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that's underestimated about hockey, especially to the less casual fans, like people who aren't fans, it looks like a chaotic game, but it's a very precise, systematic game. And I think that's where the experience comes in a lot, is that every mistake you make in hockey, you essentially get burned for it. And I think the older guys, they make less mistakes. Like a lot of fans, they don't understand why a veteran guy would play over a young guy who's faster, maybe have a better shot. But that veteran guy does the right thing pretty much every shift, where, the younger guy is a little bit more of a wild card. So like the Flyers added Nate Thompson this offseason for a fourth line center role. And that's exactly what I was hoping that they would do. Like, you don't want to bring in a 20-year-old kid to play fourth line center to start every defensive zone and to get pummeled by shots and by physically dominating players. You want a guy who just does the little things right.
Yeah, no, and coaches prefer those players. And you're right. I mean, unless you're Sean Couturier, who was very good defensively right off the bat. Most younger players aren't very good. So, right. I agree with you. The veteran guys, that's why they're still around. That's why they're still well paid. I mean, look what happened this offseason. Third liners, Barclay Goodrow, and
Coleman. Blake
Coleman get big contracts. Are those players worth that money? No, not in my opinion. But are they valuable players? Oh yes, very valuable. Mm-hmm. But they probably got overpaid because they played such a big role. But I think those contracts speak to the ideas that everybody knows that you cannot win. We saw that with Tampa; they couldn't win until they got harder to play against. Players like that, really, made a difference. And Pat Maroon, That's to me, I mean, it is size because that's part of it, but it's being harder to play against. That's what you have to be in order to be successful in the postseason. It can't be easy to enter your zone. It can't be easy to get to your net. It can't be easy to move out of your own zone. And players like that make it more difficult. And being heavy wears you down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's having the right balance of that stuff. Like there was an era where, teams were loading up on everybody because their Milan Lucic existed, right? And everybody wanted a Lucic. Now it's kind of, you realize, hey, your bottom six better be very physical because, you can have guys like Claude Giroux, Patrick Kane. These guys are great. You need them to score points, but through a playoff series, you need players to just wear other players down, to play a physical game. So let me ask you something. You brought up the contracts there, which I completely agree with you. I do think they're overpaid, especially with a stagnant cap. I'm shocked that these contracts are going out. What do you think about the big defensive contracts that have gone out for guys like Werenski and Nurse and Seth Jones? Like, what do you think about that? Those type of signings?
Those contracts are influenced by the circumstances of their teams. I tell this story that Dale Talon told me when he was general manager of the Florida Panthers. He said, when I don't do anything, if I'm not aggressive and I don't go out and get free agents, you guys say you didn't do anything. You're being a poor general manager. But in order for me to get free agents, because I'm in Florida and nobody wants to play in Florida, I have to overpay. So when I go out and I sign guys and I overpay to get them, because that's all I can do if I want to get them to come, you say, what are you doing? You're overpaying free agents. He says, so, how do I win? Well, Columbus was in that situation. They could not, for any reason, allow Zach Werenski to leave that team. Not after all the players, Panarin said, no, I don't want to stay in Columbus. And Bobrovsky, which, maybe thankfully for the Columbus, said, no, I'm not staying here. Rick Nash didn't stay there. Seth Jones didn't stay there.
Duchesne.
Werenski had to stay there. So I don't think it was a coincidence that he got just a little bit more than Seth Jones got. There was a message there. The message to the fan base is we're not going to stand for this any longer. We're going to keep our star players. There was a message to the players on the team. We intend to treat everyone right. John Davidson, I interviewed him right after he got there, and he said, we're going to make this a player-friendly organization. We're going to do things for players because, they're basically our bread and butter. And the same is true in Edmonton. Edmonton, although we don't talk about it as much anymore, they've had trouble getting players to come there. Nurse is a very good player. Probably wasn't quite worth what they had to pay him, but they had to make sure. Like, they couldn't keep Adam Larson this summer. Like, Adam Larson, they should have kept him. Like, he is a very effective, dependable, coaches love him type defenseman, and they couldn't keep him. They lost him to the Seattle Kraken.
And let me interrupt you here real quick. I'm sorry, but I do want you to continue. That is how I saw it, is that they weren't able to keep Larson. They didn't just let him walk. I'm not convinced that he wanted to re-sign there.
Yeah, no, they had every intended. Now, I think the issue was they were offering a contract with a yearly salary that started with 3 and not a 4. I think they were trying to get him in like a 3.9. They were hoping he would be, give him the hometown discount. And he said, I've been a loyal soldier. I want to. And I don't think that Seattle broke the bank to get him. I think he was pretty valuable. But I think they realized they had to keep Nurse. They had to send a message, so they overpaid there. But Hamilton, I think the same thing can be said there.
Absolutely.
The Devils are the Devils. They had paid just a little bit more than if Toronto had get him in, and so some of these contracts, but there were other contracts that I thought were a little high too that I don't understand. Like, and you brought the main point here. We're in a flat cap situation, and you could be haunted by these contracts, up the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I even heard Bruce Boudreau on TV, and I actually agree with Boudreau. I really like Dougie Hamilton, but in my mind, he is not a true number 1 defender. He's a guy who needs the right people around him to excel to put up those type of numbers, just like most great players. So when I see teams investing and going all in on these guys, even like Seth Jones, it's like these guys haven't proven to be number one guys yet, and we're already paying them like that. It's a big risk in my mind. And I see that, quite frankly, I see the moves that the Flyers made this offseason. Maybe Sanheim gets paid a little bit much, though you look and compare to the other contracts, probably why. But I look at a guy like Yvonne Peroverov, and that is a bargain of a deal. And then a guy like Ryan Ellis, that's why we traded, in my opinion, so much to get him. It's another guy that's on a very manageable cap hit. It seems to me like these contracts are going to be immensely valuable moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, usually deals that are contract oriented involve, getting rid of a bad contract, but that was a contract that Nashville needed to get out of because they needed maneuverability, but it wasn't a bad contract. In fact, it was a good contract, which is why Philadelphia wanted it. Yeah, I am not a huge fan of Chuck Fletcher's management style, but I thought he hit it out of the park this summer. I liked pretty much everything he did. I liked the Yandel move for next to nothing.
Same.
You got essentially guys who were all former number one defensemen or top pairing defensemen, and at various times. Now Yandel isn't a top pairing defenseman anymore, but he's still a valuable offensive guy. He's playing for next to nothing. He's been around the block. There's nothing he hasn't seen. He's tremendous in the dressing room. He's going to be very popular with both the media and his teammates. There's nothing but good there. And you're not overpaying him. So, that was the issue in Florida. And, look, he's not Joe Quenneville's type of player, but, he's useful. And you can, if you put him in the right role, he's going to be very, very effective. And, that role will be being on the power play and, getting, minutes when you need a goal. He's going to see a lot more ice time because he can really handle the puck. And I love the Voracek trade as well. I know we're moving off the defense.
No,
but,
please.
The Voracek trade, people have said, yeah, but, it's playmaking. Like, Voracek's still an effective player. He just isn't right for Philadelphia anymore. But Atkinson is a much better player. Like, he's a scorer. He's a consistent scorer. He can kill penalties. He's just a better all-around player than Voracek. And I was stunned that they were able to get that level of player. Like, I thought Voracek would be not a traditional salary dump, but I thought it would be, the emphasis would be on moving out his salary, not so much in who you got back. Fletcher went out and made a hockey trade that makes his team better, in my mind. Now, Atkinson has had a couple of seasons when he's been a little injury prone, but I don't see him as a guy that isn't durable. He plays hard, and he should be up there. And I'm drawing a blank. Who's the guy we haven't talked about?
There's Ristolainen, there's Ryan Ellis.
Oh, Ristolainen. He's another guy that the analytics guys don't love him. There are some moments when you're going, you shouldn't still be making that play. But he's a big guy. He does a lot of things well. Again, he's experienced. He's gotten better each time. He's been in a horrible environment. And I think that has affected his play just like it did Dahlin's.
Taylor Hall.
Yeah, Taylor Hall. But when Donnie Renato, who I think is going to be an excellent coach in Buffalo, when he took over, Dahlin got better. Like a lot of players got better. And I think, he had a little bit more of a positive environment. So I think that's going to be Ristolainen in a winning environment. And I do think it'll be a winning environment because Carter Hart is going to, I think, rebound. I didn't love every move. I did not like the Martin Jones move. I don't even understand it. Like, not that I wish that, like, Martin Jones is a veteran guy, deserves a chance to rehabilitate his image. But he needs to do that in Arizona or Buffalo or a team
I don't mean to cut you off, but I think it's the Kim Dillabaugh influence there, right? Our goalie coach has a history with Martin Jones. Yeah. They probably vouched for him. Like, oh, do you think you can turn his game around? Yeah, I can do it, right? Like, I know Martin.
Yeah, well, All I got to say is 3 consecutive years sub 9 save percentage on a team that wasn't all that bad defensively. It just hasn't been able to do it in a very long time, and there were other options out there that I thought were more favorable.
And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they bring in another veteran at some point if Jones doesn't work out.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I think if he shows early on that he's still the guy that can't hit a 900 save percentage, I think they will do that because this Philadelphia team is a contender, so you can't fool around with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think the defense can afford to have, and I agree. I have a lot of faith in Carter Hart. But he's not going to be able to play every game, right? We have a really condensed schedule. Fletcher's brought it up over and over again. So you need a guy who's to be reliable. I'm in wait and see mode with most goalies. I feel like they're always affected by the team they play in front of. And if he's playing a backup role, I'm kind of like, we don't have much expectations. And that seems to be when guys do the best when expectations are low. So I'm kind of hoping for that. Let me ask you something about Atkinson, because I always remember him being a pain in the ass to play against. Like every game he annoyed me, which is why I got excited because he always scored timely goals. Do you think there's any chance that he can hit a 40 goal pace again, playing with guys like Claude Giroux, like Couturier?
Yeah, I'd say not, just because that's not the way the league is now. But he's still he's a smart scorer, and by that, part of scoring now is not so much ability, but understanding where the seams of the defense is. Like, this era is made for Brett Hull, who, Brett Hull used to, I wrote Brett Hull's book, and he always talked about his dad telling him at an early age, you're most in the play and most dangerous when everyone thinks you're out of the play. And there are a lot of scorers in this league who are very effective because they understand that. And I think that's one of Atkinson's strengths. He's a smaller player, but he understands where the soft underbelly of the defensive structure is. He understands, like Brett Hull is that if you make a button hook and skate away from the net, they lose you, and then do a quick curl back. And if you watch him, he'll do that. I think he's a guy that with the right guys could suddenly, and because Columbus didn't have any of the right guys, they still don't have a center in my mind, at least a legitimate number one center. So I think he could score 30. 40 may be a bit tough, but who knows? Okay.
Yeah, and that was my thought. Is I just wrote like a short piece on is this isn't outside of Artemi Panarin. I think Giroux is probably the best playmaker he's ever played with in his career. And obviously Giroux's not in his prime, but this got a team with a lot of skill. I think they completely underperformed last year. So, I kind of see him as a perfect fit. We haven't had a guy who plays like him in some time, guy who's 1-2-way, which is great, but a guy who thinks shoot first, right? And is good inside the paint, right? Like he's got good hands. He wants to score goals. Like he doesn't always want to pass. We have a lot of passers. That's why I was hoping maybe the right combination with him and Giroux, spark the power play again. Plus, obviously, Yandel and Ellis. And I don't know. I saw that 40 might be a stretch, but if he can be a 35 goal scorer, I think it would be a huge win.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ryan Ellis, we did mention him, but, I've watched him for a long time. I've paid a lot of attention to the Predators because I know one of their vice presidents there very well, and like I said, I've known David Poyle for a long time. He's been very effective at both ends of the ice, and as much as we talk about two-way defensemen, there really aren't as many of them out there as you think, and he's certainly one of them. He's in terms of one-on-one defender, he reminds me a little bit of Rafalski because of the size. Like he's got that move down where he can squeeze you against the boards when you're going wide on him. It's kind of like when Nick Lidstrom used to play for the Red Wings, where guys would go to the net and they never really even understood how Lidstrom had stopped them, but he did. There was the sticks and arms and things all over. That's kind of the way Ellis defends. Like, they try to get through him, and he's there, and his leg's there, and his stick is there, and you can't figure out why you can't get by him, but you can. So
yeah, he actually I compared him because I was trying to compare him to Flyers for people to listen. I was kind of comparing him to Kimo Timonen a little bit in similar skill set. I think maybe he's more offensive though. From what I understand, he's got a big shot on him.
Yes, he does. Really, the only negative on him is that beard. It's really ugly, and I shouldn't talk because I've had a COVID ugly beard, but yeah, he's a real effective player. The Predators really didn't want to trade him,
No,
but they have two of the worst contracts known to man in Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. Not nearly as bad as Duchene, but still bad. And they needed some room to do something.
yeah,
And something had to give, and they were pretty strong defensively. And all that talk last year about Ekholm and where he was going to go, and then they decided, well, maybe it makes more sense if we sign Ekholm because they have a bunch of smaller defensemen. Fabro is not very big, and they've got that Kyrie. I can't even think who it is now. But they have smaller defensemen, and they thought maybe Ellis would have to go. But they liked him. They weren't trading him because he was in the doghouse or anything.
right. Yeah, I don't. I remember actually when the Ekholm rumors came around, I kept saying I don't want Ekholm. I want Ryan Ellis. I was like, I want your second best defenseman. That was my thought. And I think Phil Myers probably gave them some of that size that they were looking for. And I wouldn't doubt that they can develop him better than Philadelphia defensively.
Well, that's true for everyone. Like I actually said this to David Poyle, and he laughed at me. But, the way the NHL works is every NHL team thinks they can develop a player better than the other team could.
Sure.
Nolan Patrick gets traded.
Sure.
And then they ship him to Vegas for Glass.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Kelly McCrimmon, because he had him before, says, I can get Patrick straightened out, and he'll be a real effective player. And David Poyle is thinking, oh, we'll get Glass turned around because they say he was terrible there, but we know what we're doing here. So that's the way it always works. So it'll be interesting to see who's right on that. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that Phil Myers took a little bit of a step back, but I still think he has a lot of potential. And I would not be surprised if they turn his career around there and kind of get him going. What do you think about a top pairing of Yvonne Peroverov and Ryan Ellis? This is probably the best defenseman that Peroverov has played with in his time here. Better than
it's going to make him so much more effective because he, it seems to me he had to worry about who he was playing with before
every time,
and he doesn't have to worry anymore. So he can do his thing. Ellis can do his thing. I think Ellis is the type of guy that will want to talk about it. Which is always crucial in those situations. Okay, when I do this, I notice you're doing this. What do you need me to do here? So I think that will be very, very effective. And it makes, basically you get a much better player than you had there before, and you make Peroverov a better player. So, it's really a win-win. That's why I said because I have been negative about Chuck Fletcher, and I just thought all of these deals made Philadelphia a better team. Everyone except Martin Jones, but we'll give him a pass on that because you explained to me that the goalie coach there is going to turn him around. So
right,
give you that one. So
yeah, and they do have 3 young goalies in Sandstrom, Ersan, and Ustimenko. I don't know if necessarily they're NHL ready, but maybe they're banking on that a little bit too, and they're up against the cap. Can I ask you something before? I do want to keep talking Flyers, but why are you down on Chuck Fletcher in general?
I just didn't think he did a good job in Minnesota.
Okay.
He left a culture there that, Bill Guerin went in there. The first thing, he didn't say it in such a way that he cast any dispersion about it, but he was basically saying the culture here is awful. And it was awful for several years. And they never corrected it. The owner essentially has sort of implied even that the culture was a mess. And what did Bill Guerin do? He took a bold, scary, dangerous step of moving out Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. next year, $13 million. That's how significant he felt that culture issue was. So I just didn't think Chuck, did anything. I mean, that you could make a case that he drafted some really good guys, but I just didn't think he wasn't aggressive enough there, and that's why I was stunned where that he did so much this summer, and I thought was very effective. Now, it'd be interesting to see if we're right about this, but boy, looking in, I don't know how anybody could criticize these deals, even if they turned out that, say, Yandel doesn't work out.
There's no risk there.
Yeah, there's no risk, and the upside could be big. So I like those moves. I mean, I just liked them all, and and I don't know how you can go wrong on the Atkinson deal as well. So there's an extra year there, but
yep.
I don't think there's any chance that Voracek is going to be great and Atkinson's going to be bad. I just don't see that.
Well, and to your point, I think there's a lot of criticized there in Minnesota. I remember they're always they were like good, but they were never good enough to really compete for a cup. And, maybe he has a lot of lessons learned from there that he's kind of taken to the Flyers and why he chose to be aggressive. I mean, this isn't a city where you can really take your time being good. Comcast won't let you. So
right.
He probably knows that as well and knows that he had to make some big decisions. I did see, surprisingly, I saw a lot of people say the Flyers defense wasn't even really improved. I was shocked personally when I hear that. I don't know how you guys can say that the defense that the Flyers put out there last year, who were mostly kids, and there was no Niskanen. I would say Niskanen was here and now he's gone. I would say he's a pretty good defenseman. I loved him. But Ryan Ellis, even Ristolainen as like a number 4 role, and then bringing in Yandel. This is the best defensive core I've seen in several years for the Flyers, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's addition by subtraction with moving out Gossesbeer. And
we got Yandel, cheap version of Ghost in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, and a better version. Because Yandel has a level of consistency in terms of his offensive abilities. So, I don't see that either. I don't. I've had some people say to me they didn't like losing Myers, but if you're going to make this kind of deal, you have to give something up, and I don't even think that's a major loss. I think that it could be. I mean, there's some potential there, but. So I liked it. I love the boldness. That's like you said, it's not what Chuck did. And it seemed like in Minnesota, he let things happen. They did, do some free agent signing there, obviously. And, but it, just never paid off. And, it's, after you make a big move, you then have to supplement, whatever the big move was with, in, and he just didn't do that. And they were like on a treadmill. They were just pumping away and not getting anywhere.
I totally feel that.
Yeah, so I just felt he didn't seem to be the the right guy there. And the one thing, ownership really can make a difference. Craig Leopold, this is what he does now. He's all about his team. There are owners that are more heavily involved in their other businesses. That's not Leopold. Leopold is heavily invested in his Wild. So, for the fact that they haven't been able to get anywhere, I think was frustrating with him. And I think he feels pretty good now with Bill Guerin. Yeah, no, I like Bill Guerin a lot, and I think he's done. When you see like changes, like I don't want to say complete night and day, but when you see a team, drop some players and all of a sudden improve, he's he's pulling the right, pulling the right strings to make the team move forward. I really like what Chuck Fletcher has done in this offseason as well. I didn't love his Minnesota team. I believe to some degree he's called a players GM, and I never liked the sound of that. I'd rather have a guy like Lou Lamoriello. I know people don't like the old school thing, but
but I like people who are rigid and they lead. Like they're not your friends. They're, these GMs, they're not meant to be your friends. So like, I'm not a huge on that. I'd rather have the coach have a good relationship with the players and my GM kind of be methodical and really, really, I guess, not nuanced, like just really methodical in the way he approaches everything and is strict. And you look at the contracts that Lamoriello pulls off, like that's what I want to see. I want to see, oh my God, how do you get him for so cheap? That's the stuff that I want to see always. But I do think Chuck Fletcher's had a good offseason so far. So let me ask you this, that there's been a lot of change actually in the Metro in general. How do you see the Metro stacking up? What's your 8? Like, how do you see them going?
I think it's tough to read,
Definitely.
to be sure. I'm going to put I'm going to put the Penguins down. I mean, the biggest thing that I've said that people haven't been happy with me over is that, and I'm keeping open the possibility that they're not done. But what I've seen thus far, the Penguins are not a better hockey team. And in that Metro division, if you're not getting better, you're going lower. So I'm putting them down. I have them out of the playoffs.
Like 5 or 6 or lower.
I've got them lower. I got them 7. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. Now, saying that, I know Brian Burke very well, and I know Hextall, and at some point, Brian's going to say to Hexy, Zucker is still there. He hasn't quite fit. He's still a good hockey player. They haven't gotten any bigger. To me, they're worse losing Tanev. They didn't really like it was accepted that their goaltending wasn't good in the postseason. They didn't do anything about that. So I have them down near the bottom. And then at the top, I when we did this on Hockey Buzz, I put the Flyers at number 1, which also caused people to, and it was all just based on, I like their talent. I like Carter Hart. I think he's going to rebound season. I thought what Chuck Fletcher did makes that team a lot better. I think the Capitals are still a good team, I have them, kind of second and third. I'm trying to think of how I had them. I'm trying to be consistent what I had them before. I've got the Rangers pushing. I think Carolina and the Rangers. I've got the Islanders too. That's what I had.
Okay.
And I think they're going to push. I think the Islanders are a very effective team. I found it interesting. You were just saying too that Lou Lamoriello is not a player's coach. Yet every player who ever played for him loved the guy.
Oh.
I mean, they really do. And
I would love playing for him personally.
Pardon me?
I'm the type of person, my personality, like the reason I said that is like, I know you can't have a beard with him, like to a fan.
That's
like,
true. Yeah.
Like he's not like a free, do whatever you want guy, but he's a guy, in my opinion, is probably a lot like Chris Pronger. Is just, he has his things. He knows a way to do it. I think he's probably pretty honest, pretty fair, pretty consistent. And again, keeps everything close. That's how I see him. I love that stuff personally.
Yeah, and I think the Islanders could win the cup, depending on how it ends up and where they end up. I mean, they've got 2 great goalies. I still like their defense. I think they're going to miss Nick Leddy because they don't really have anybody quite like him. So that's going to be interesting. He's a guy that gets the puck through the neutral zone pretty effectively, and he gets the puck up to the forwards. I think their offense will be better this season. So I've got them to, and then in the 3, 4, 5, I think, you're talking Capitals, Carolina, and the Rangers, kind of pushing in that group. And then I have the Devils, who I think will be better, but you look at their roster and they're not there yet.
They're young.
I thought Tom Fitzgerald did a good job as well. He added a lot of pieces, but if you look at their roster, it still looks too much like a patchwork quilt. Like they have some skilled guys there in Hughes, and now they've added Hamilton. But they still got Subban, who doesn't quite fit anymore, and I just think that they're still a year away. So we got them, and then I got, of course, the Penguins at 7, and then
Blue
who did
Jackets.
we forget?
Blue Jackets.
The Blue Jackets were last. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always last. That they still don't have a number one center.
Yeah.
I don't think, and I think they're just treading water right now. So
I think they know that, right? They collected all those assets. They're in a retooling stage. They went for it, which, quite frankly, looking back, probably was a good idea. This was the best team they had. They're like, this is the most success we're probably going to bring to this city in a while. Like, let's get ourselves taken serious. It was a big risk, but it was probably worth it for them to do it. In retrospect, like, they got a bunch of first round picks again. It's not the end of the world, and they lost the talent that they had anyway. I think those are really interesting rankings. I don't actually disagree with you. People call me a homer if I say the Flyers would be finished at first. I mean, I was high on them last year too, but I look at the roster and I don't really see any holes in it. And when I don't see holes in the lineup, I go, okay, well, everything that made Carolina good, right? I think the Flyers have everything to match. Everything that makes the Capitals good, the Flyers can match. It's really just playing to a system, playing precise, and being in shape, conditioning. Like, that's kind of what I see is the Flyers. That was the biggest reason, in my opinion, they struggled. They weren't in the best shape, and they didn't play to the system very well. And I think if they can resolve those two things and bring in all that veteran leadership, I think should help. They can bring in and do those things. They can be the same team that went on a tear going into the playoffs and beat some of the best teams doing that. And they were winning home and homes. I think it was like 3 years ago now, but they were home and home victories, or home and away victories. They would play the same team back to back, and they would win both games, just instilling their will. When I see teams do that, I'm like, this is a contender type of team. So I don't think it's that crazy that you're saying the Flyers are number one. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked personally.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I worry about with that selection is there are a couple of coaches in my group near the top that I think are better coaches than Vigneault. I mean, Barry Trotz.
Mm-hmm. Easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rod Brindamore. Rod Brindamore, there used to be a cliche about, I'd run through a brick wall for him. Rod's guys would run through a brick wall for him. Like, they love the guy. They love the fact that he can, outrun them in the mile run.
He's by example.
Go out and scrimmage with them. They love how much he works out. He cares about them. I've been told that most coaches want to say with regard to their personnel, and Brindamore really doesn't want to get involved because, he likes to just care about his players and, doesn't want to have to make decisions that affect their livelihoods. He'll play the right guys, but, he doesn't, want any thoughts on that. And I think they play exceptionally hard for him. That's part of their deal is Rod Brindamore. Like, that's why I said the whole time when everyone was away, I also knew the fact that he was building a house there too, which I kept telling everybody, hey, they're picking out curtains, he's not going anywhere, so.
I didn't think go anywhere.
But, so I like that. I think Vigneault is a good coach. He's a seasoned coach. He's been around, but sometimes his moves strike me as odd when I'm watching it. So we'll see. But I like that team. Sooner or later they're going to put it together. Why not this year? And I thought Hart's stuff was self-fulfilling last year. The worse it got, the more he struggled, and I think he needed a reset.
Simple as that.
Reason that happens with children, where sometimes it's just not going well, and you got to go sit on the couch for 15 minutes. That's what Hart needed. He needed to go sit on the couch for about 15 minutes and kind of get it squared away. And it wasn't all him. The defense wasn't good.
No.
So it's going to be interesting. But that division is so tough. That's so hard to pick. A lot of people are saying Carolina will take a step back this year. So it'll be interesting. I don't think it'll help them if they continue on in a salary dispute with Svechnikov.
No.
I don't think he's re-signed yet.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so I don't understand that. Like, to me, he would be a guy that, if I was owner, I'd just call him up and say, let's just get this done, you want him for forever. He's the guy that's going to score 50 goals at some point. So
yeah. Well, they seem to have their way of signing guys. I can appreciate to some degree because they don't really have any bad contracts. But at a certain point, you also, you don't want to burn relationships with your top guys that are going to be there for 8 years, right? You kind of just, you want things to be smooth and seamless. You want to be happy and to attract other talent too. So let me ask you this. If, let's say the Flyers don't come out strong this year, let's say they miss the playoffs, let's say they end up at 5 or 6, right? And because Chuck Fletcher paid a cost for a lot of stuff, right? These were expensive moves to make and they cost money. Do you think that there is a chance that Alain Vigneault finds his way out if the Flyers struggle again?
Yes. Yeah. I do. That's just, having covered the league for 35 years and know how it works. Somebody always has to pay a price.
Yep.
To be sure. I wouldn't doubt that Chuck Fletcher is also on the hot seat as well. I mean,
I think so too.
If it were back in the days of Ed Snyder, that would certainly be true. Because this is results-oriented business, and if they expected this team to do well. If it doesn't do well, they haven't lived up to expectations. So, but certainly Vigneault, because that's what happens to coaches when they don't win.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be the first step. And then, you get one, Chuck, and then if whatever coach you bring in from there doesn't improve the situation, you're probably out from there. But again, I tell people all the time, it's like my dream to be GM of the Flyers. I would take that job knowing I'm getting fired. Like, that's okay. Like, most of them don't last.
They
all get fired.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah, it is a kind of a strange world, but I'm here in Detroit where we have a GM who really walks on water. I find it so curious
amazing.
That most GMs are always on the hot seat, but here in Detroit, because he's Yzerman, and really, like, you can't find fault with anything he does. He's
amazing.
Yeah.
I love his off season.
Well, yeah, and everything he's done. I mean, the Verana trade with Anthony Mantha, like, oh my gosh. The Velkovic coming in to play goal. They needed a young goalie. He gave a 3rd-round pick. They drafted one of the top goalies in the draft. They moved up in the draft to do it. Even a guy like Mitchell Stevens, a very effective role player. So, yeah, it's interesting, and it's so funny because sometimes the fan base, they weren't sure about Letty, because that's going away from the rebuild. But I followed it on social media, and within 10 minutes, the what's going on here came to me. Well, if that's what Steve thinks is right, then that's it. Like, I think his honeymoon period may last 5-6 years. Like,
yeah,
it's just.
I mean, he's earned it. I mean, everything he did in Tampa Bay, he made all the right risky moves. I mean, that team wouldn't be where it is without him. And honestly, you look at how quickly he's turning Detroit around. It's like, I'm excited about the Detroit Red Wings. I'm like looking at their lineup. I was like, okay. I was like, in a couple of years, this might be a serious contender all of a sudden. Yeah,
it is. It is interesting that, like, I don't know, having lived in the city for most of my life, that there's ever been more excitement over a drafted defenseman than Moritz Seider. Like, the buzz about him is just incredible. Like, they have followed his every move, and they know all of his stats from Sweden, and they followed him in the World Championships, and people just can't wait until he shows up. Like, I'm a little worried about the expectations being so high. I mean, he's still 20 years old, but there is a level of excitement, and I don't think anyone thinks they're going to make the playoffs this year, but I think everybody thinks they'll be better.
So how do you see them this year? Do you see them any chance of being a playoff team? Do you think?
I don't, because they just have too many younger players that have to be good. I suppose you could argue if Philip Zadina reached 20 goals this year, and Rasmussen played like Jordan Stahl on the third line center. And if Larkin and Bertuzzi stay healthy and get 20 some goals each, and Verona hits 35, well, yeah, I guess so. But the Atlantic is reasonably tough too. Boston is still there. Tampa, the core group is still there, so they're going to be effective.
Sure.
I guess that everybody will be chasing Montreal. So,
yeah,
Montreal will be the.
And they take a step backward too, though, right? I mean, they lost, especially to start the year.
Back, yeah. Dano was a really good third line center, and I know why he left, because I think the Kings said you can be number 2 center for us, and every number 3 center always thinks he's the number 2 center, so I'm sure that's what he wanted to do. But on missing Shea Weber, that's the glue that kind of holds them all together. So
yeah, that's gonna be a huge loss for them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to maybe give people some insight as to what you're working on, anything upcoming, anything they should check out?
Well, I'm working on some books. I have a book out with, I've written a lot of books, and I have a book that I'm working with Bernie Nichols, who I sort of jumped into this project late in the game. I'm sort of like the relief pitcher. They brought me in to kind of finish the project. So I've been getting that out. So that book will be out next year. And that's pretty good. I mean, he, very gifted player, scored 70 goals one year. There's only been, a handful of players that have scored 70 goals. And a lot of people forget that Bernie Nichols is on that list. So I've been doing that. And then, I'm, as I said, being Bob Duff and I are serving, he was the former Windsor, Ontario hockey columnist for the Windsor Star. He and I are kind of splitting the beat job for the Red Wings, and then I'm writing a national column for Hockey Buzz. So I do 20 plus columns a week or a month for them. So I'm pretty busy. I'm still active in the hockey world.
Well, that's awesome. And guys, anybody who's listening, make sure to follow Kevin on Twitter and make sure to check out his work, and definitely watch him on Hockey Buzz. You have awesome insight. Like I noticed it early listening to you. You've been around obviously so long within the game. And I don't mean just like your age. I mean, like within that community, the amount of stories you have, the amount of things that you seem to know that go on behind the scenes. I always just appreciated it so much. I knew I'd have you on here and you'd have something to share along those lines.
Well, I'll be happy to do it again during the season when we get going. And, I try to keep track of all the teams, and I still talk to the same people I always did when I was with the USA Today. So I usually kind of know some things anyway.
Awesome deal. Well, I will definitely make sure to have you back on. I would love that.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Make sure to like and subscribe and share. Check out our team store as well. It's up there. It's new. And just, support us any way you can. If you just even like and share stuff, it's a humongous help. And about half the listeners subscribe, which is actually not too bad. So if you guys can subscribe, that definitely helps, as well as we continue our journey to becoming more relevant. Thank you everybody for listening, and remember to always stay gritty.